Okay, so we're going to be starting in the Americas. And so our theme for today is to be looking at man's connection with the natural world. So we're going to be looking at some really early sites, so prehistoric as well as some ancient sites. And so we're going to start first in South America. And so for a little bit of context for you is that we are in Chavin. So Chavin is in modern day Peru. It's really close to the coast. And so it is located right here. You can see that it's in between two rivers. It's also in between two major mountain ranges of the Andes, basically the Black and the White Mountains. There is, a connection between it being in this really fertile river valley. And it's also located next to some really important hot springs. So it's basically a really strategic location that would be very, fertile according to the people who would go there, right? Because it's close to the coast where you can get the riches of the ocean, and then you would get the benefits of that river valley, and then you could have the mountains, and then it's really not all that far away from the Amazon as well. So here is what those mountains look like. The white ones are the taller peaks where we can see they're capped with snow, and then I think you understand why the Black Mountains are called the Black Mountains. And so the complex is quite interesting. This would be a place that pilgrims from all around would come to. And so they would come to this location, and most of them would meander around this temple complex. A select few would be able to go inside. So the people are coming from all the territories around here. This was a major pilgrimage site. So just like how we saw Romanesque pilgrimages and Gothic pilgrimages, as well as Hindu pilgrimages, people were traveling from distant lands here. So people are coming from the Amazon, they're coming from the mountains, they're coming from the ocean, they're coming from the other regions from the south, and they're all coming to this really important city that is created in this really lush natural environment. So this is the plan that they have included on the right in the 250. It's really spare. There's not a lot of visual information. So we'll look at this one on the left as well as a recreation of what we think this courtyard looked like. So one of the major features that you notice is that there is a square as well as a round like courtyard. There's a plaza. So think about at other religious locations how, right, and why people gather in courtyards, right? There's normally some sort of religious experience that takes place. I really love this diagram on the right, excuse me, on the left as well, because it really does show you the proximity to the river. Right? So here's a recreation of what it used to look like. You can see that the plaza is sunken, which I think is quite interesting. I think that would make the architecture feel larger than it actually was, right? But it would put you on a lower status than maybe someone on a higher elevation, right? And you notice that the slope of the walls kind of angle towards the sun. We'll see that in other Central American and South American cultures like the Incas, right? So they're like the Egyptians, kind of reminiscent of the sun. So when you watch this video by UNESCO, make sure that you focus on the exterior decoration at the site, as well as how one is supposed to experience the interior. Who is allowed to go inside the temple.
Okay, so what kind of decoration was on the outside? What kind of decoration on the outside of this temple and around these sunken courtyards? What was on the exterior? Alana, did you get any of that?
I think they said there were tablets with religious imagery.
Right. And so we'll see an example of one of those exterior images in just a little bit. And then we'll get to see that Lenzon image as well on the interior. So what was the interior like? What's the interior like? Isabel, can you help? What's the inside like?
They said it was sort of mysterious and like windy.
Right. It had a bunch of like maze-like halls that kind of led you into a bunch of different directions. And so in the old temple is this Lanzon stela. So it's a stela, a stele that we talked about before. It's an important marker, okay? So when we look at it, it's kind of in an interesting shape, right? It's kind of like fatter at the bottom, and at the top it has kind of a thin shape to it. Now they didn't really talk about that a lot. They said that, that it has the Spanish name for a spear, but it's not in a spear shape. So I want to make sure that we understand that it's not a weapon, it's not a spear. It actually is a digging stick, right? So we're in a fertile valley, right? So it's like a ceremonial digging stick. We're in a fertile valley where agriculture could be produced. And so this would be kind of like a handle at the top, and then this big giant stick that would be digging into the earth. And keep in mind that when we think about like dark, mysterious spaces, we often are thinking of like magical places. Now this isn't a cave, right? And this isn't a garbhagriha, right? But this is like maybe some sort of womb space, right? So thinking about essence of fertility, bringing prosperity to the people, right? And as you kind of meander in this maze-like temple, right? Some people were allowed to see the spear, right? Some people were allowed to see this sculpture. And so it's kind of an interesting effect. I have some videos that we're not going to watch because their quality is rather poor, but people were drugged when they entered this temple. And so what they would do is they get psychedelic drugs from probably the Amazon. They would eat mushrooms or eat other plants, and they would start to see things. And so they're walking through these mazes, and they are kind of getting disorientated, right? And then they would happen upon this little opening, and then they would see this monstrous creature. So it would have kind of an otherworldly effect. Now the video mentioned that only a few people got to come inside. So what the heck were people experiencing outside? I don't know if the people outside were drugged, but they could hear strange noises. Right above the Lanzon was an opening, and there's a passage that led out, and they had really good acoustics that they tested out. And so they would blow conch shells from the sea, right? They would get these conch shells from the ocean. They would blow them, and so people were hearing strange sounds coming from the earth. And the people inside are probably thinking that it's coming from this crazy, I don't want to say demonic because it's not demonic, but this monstrous spear-like digging stick, right? So for the people outside and the people inside, quite unique experiences, right? And so here's some of those videos that I have for you if you're interested in watching. I think some of them are on like the History Channel, which we all know the History Channel is a little bit like fake History Channel sometimes. Sometimes it's like alien invasion. And so take it for what it is. But they do talk about some of that psychedelic drugs that were used, right? So let's go ahead and look at the imagery on our digging stick. Okay. So when we look at the stick, right, it has some really unique characteristics that are similar to the exterior image that we'll see as well, right? At the very top that part that is like the handle, right? That maybe a god could hold this stick, right? Because it's so big. In that handle, there's a channel. So there's a groove that has nothing like decorating it. What could a groove be used for? What would you might use the channel for? Any ideas? Maybe they poured liquid down that channel. And you can imagine that it would then pour and accumulate into all of the relief that's carved in it, right? On that handle part, there are parts of the face of a jaguar. So jaguars would have come from the Amazon, right? They would have come from the Amazon. And then of course from the Amazon, there's a lot of snakes. So there's snake images. Notice how they spiral around and kind of become the hair and the eyebrows, right, of this creature. He has jaguar eyes and he has caiman fangs. So caimans, you know, like they look like mini like crocodiles, right? It's got elements of that. He's wearing earrings, right? He's got talons or claws, right? And then he has these poppy vines that would have come from the Amazon as well. So we have this kind of composite creature in the shape of a digging stick. So that probably makes us feel like he's probably somehow connected to some sort of fertility, right? So on the outside, we have our plaza, right? We have the natural environment. And on the inside, we have this maze-like structure with these strange sounds. And everyone would kind of experience those strange sounds, right? So there is one of those exterior images, right? There's one of these exterior images in the 250 as well. And there's a lot less known about it than what we saw with the interior one, right? But it has a lot of similarities. How is it similar? Like, let's think about the style of these. We didn't really go over style, right? This is in low relief, right? It's in low relief. But what's some similarities in that style? What is some imagery that we see repeated from the close-up of the Lenzon to this on the left? Rahil, can you help me?
The swirls are being repeated.
Right. It's got squirrel, and if you look at the squirrel at the very end, they have snake heads. Can you see the snake head? Right? See the snake heads here? Right? What kind of eyes do they have? They have the jaguar eyes, right? See those big round eyes? Right? And we see that it's very stylized and simplified. Right? So in this image, it's kind of interesting. It's almost like a repetitive pattern. Can you guys see how there's similar, like a figure here and a figure here? And then this one is facing the opposite direction. So we have two facing the left and one facing the right. This was probably a part of more, right? And then they have similar features at the base, right? So we have three different faces in profile, right? And you can see that they have those large eyes and this giant nose. And then they have snakes, kind of like at the base and their like legs, right? And then this guy over here, right, he has a claw that's very similar to what we saw at the Lanzon, right? And they have these one, I think the teeth are like my favorite part, like this nose, mouth. Look at how vicious those teeth are. So probably like caiman teeth, right? Or the teeth of jaguars, right? So this sort of style is called contour rivalry. Contour rivalry. This was a new one to me as well when it came to this new image set. And so it is basically where you merge imagery together to intentionally be confusing. So what they would do is take this imagery and have it kind of blend and merge in a mysterious way. And this is something that we will also see across the Americas. This is often done in indigenous people from like Canada and like the Inuit people, where they'll merge multiple images and they kind of all blend together in one. And then you're not quite sure what you're looking at. And they would use this technique to impress the pilgrims to make these creatures feel otherworldly, right? They were there for those initiates, those people who are allowed to be brought into the temple. It would teach them about their religion, teach them about their natural world, and it would be very mysterious, just like the temple and all of the other attributes, thinking about the sound and the smells and what you would, see if you were able to see anything. Obviously, you would see some of this art, right? So the jaguar image is used in both, but the jaguars didn't necessarily live near Chavin. They were, coming from these other regions. So the people who make the pilgrimages would have the jaguars in their own environments. Does that make sense? So it's kind of a blending of imagery from all of the different places that the pilgrims are coming from. Okay? The last piece that we have from Chavin is a golden nose ornament. And can you see any animals that may have inspired this nose ring? What animals might have inspired it? Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time, so I'll give it to you, right? It has jaguar eyes, a snake body, and it supposedly was born on the, like, in between your nostrils, and it might have been inspired by, like, whiskers of, like, a jaguar as well, right? There are still people in Peru today who wear whiskers to emulate the jaguar, right? So this would be dangling from your nose. Okay, that's where we're going to end today, and we'll continue this theme on Tuesday.